I've got a question for you. Do you think it's ever okay to kill a dictator? Now, obviously, this is an extremely complex moral and political issue, but if you happen to be living in ancient Rome around 45 BC, then the answer to that question was a very clear yes. Because in that year, Rome's most powerful man, dictator Julius Caesar, was stabbed to death by a group of senators. And that's what we'll be exploring today. Because there are two obvious questions that need answering here. Why did they do it? And how did they get away with it? We can probably save the how for later, though, because the why is a little bit more interesting. As we open this story, Caesar has just come out on top in a civil war against his old rival, Pompey the Great. And in the aftermath of that conflict, he's basically the undisputed ruler of Rome. In fact, the Roman Senate has given him the title of dictator for life. And with that title comes complete control over the government, the army, and pretty much every aspect of Roman life. So why on earth would anyone want to assassinate him? Well, to answer that question, we first have to understand that even though Caesar is now at the peak of his power, he's actually not entirely safe. He still has enemies, people who want him dead, and one of them controls a very important part of the Roman world. You see, while Caesar has conquered most of the Mediterranean, including Rome itself, the province of Sicily is still in enemy hands. More specifically, it's under the control of Sextus Pompey, the son of Caesar's old rival, Pompey the Great. But more importantly, Sicily is the main producer of grain in the Roman world. And since grain is free, or at least heavily subsidized in Rome, that makes it an incredibly valuable territory to control. In fact, Rome relies on grain imports from Sicily so much that if the shipments from Sicily stop, the Romans would literally starve to death within months. Now, during the Civil War, Caesar managed to secure the loyalty of Egypt's queen Cleopatra, who also had a grain empire of her own. And with her help, Rome's grain supply remained stable even after Pompey seized control of Sicily. But with the war now over, Caesar needs to find a way to deal with Sextus Pompey and bring Sicily back into the fold. If he can do that, then Rome will be truly united once again. But there are only two ways of doing it. The first is to invade Sicily himself, crush Sextus's forces, and take the province by force. Or second, he could try to negotiate a peace treaty with Sextus. And when we're talking about Julius Caesar here, you can probably guess which option he wants to choose. Throughout his career, Caesar has proven himself to be a brilliant military commander, conquering Gaul, defeating the Helvetians, and besting Pompey's forces in the Civil War. But outside of battle, he's not quite as capable. See, as a military commander, Caesar is ruthless and ambitious. But in politics, he tends to be indecisive and timid. He's worried about upsetting the status quo and upsetting the balance of power in the Senate, which may have worked in the past, but it's not a good strategy when dealing with someone like Sextus Pompey. You see, unlike Caesar, Sextus is young, reckless, and idealistic. In fact, he doesn't really want to rule Sicily as much as he wants to reform the Roman Republic. Throughout his life, Sextus has been an outspoken critic of the growing divide between the rich and poor in Roman society, and he believes that only a drastic change to the political system can fix it. Unfortunately for Sextus, the last time he tried to enact such changes, he was exiled from Rome and forced to flee to Sicily. Now, in theory, Caesar could have just ignored him, let him keep the province, and called it a day. After all, Rome does rely on grain imports from Sicily, and without Sextus's cooperation, those shipments would almost certainly stop. So maybe it would have been better for Caesar to leave Sextus alone and just deal with the hunger riots in Rome. But instead, Caesar is worried about sending a message. He wants everyone in Rome to know that he is the ultimate power in the city, and no one, not even a petty rebel like Sextus, can defy him without consequences. And with that mindset, Caesar is eventually convinced by his advisors to declare war on Sextus Pompey. But it's not going great. Caesar has assembled a navy to sail over to Sicily and blockade the island. But Sextus's fleet is surprisingly effective. His ships are fast, maneuverable, and well armed, and they keep managing to escape the Roman blockade and sail back to Sicily. In fact, things get so frustrating for Caesar that he actually makes a speech about it. And when he does, he accidentally stokes the flames of controversy surrounding his ambitions for the Roman Republic. You see, according to Plutarch, Caesar made that speech while standing next to a statue of Alexander the Great, one of history's most famous monarchs. And during his speech, he talked about all the amazing things he had accomplished, and then pointed to the statue of Alexander and said, quote, "I him the son of a king." Now, technically, that statement isn't false. Caesar's great-grandfather was actually king of Bithynia, a small kingdom in Anatolia. But still, the idea of a Roman king is a highly controversial topic, because for centuries, the Romans have seen their republic as a shining beacon of freedom and democracy in the ancient world, and the idea of it being ruled by a king goes against everything the Romans believe in. But when Caesar says that he too could be the son of a king, it leaves the door open to a lot of speculation. And throughout ancient Rome, people start to wonder, is Caesar angling for the crown? Is this why he's been seizing so much power for himself? And is this why he's waging war on Sextus Pompey? Because if Caesar does want to become king, then taking out Sextus, the last remaining obstacle to his power, would make a lot of sense. Unfortunately for Caesar, he didn't help his case much by being so secretive about it. When people asked him point blank if he wanted to be king, he refused to answer. And that silence only added fuel to the fire. Then one day, the people of Rome were celebrating the birthday of the goddess Athena, and as part of the celebration, they held a chariot race in the Circus Maximus. But halfway through the race, one of the chariots broke down, and the driverless chariot sped out of control towards the crowd. Now normally, this would have been a terrible tragedy, but it turned out that Caesar's wife Calpurnia was nearby, and he had sent a bunch of soldiers to protect her. They managed to stop the chariot before it caused any damage, and Calpurnia's life was spared. But again, it wasn't the first time something like this happened. You see, a few weeks earlier, Calpurnia was at the theater when a chandelier fell from the ceiling, narrowly missing her. And then a few days after that, she had a dream that Caesar was being crowned king of Rome. When these stories started spreading, the people of Rome lost it. They believed that Caesar was trying to set himself up as a king, and that the gods themselves were trying to warn them about it. And with tensions already high over Caesar's handling of Sextus Pompey, these rumors only made things worse. As Plutarch tells it, Caesar kept getting messages from various senators telling him to lay down his plans for securing a kingship, and as the pressure mounted, Caesar was eventually forced to address the Senate. But even then, he wouldn't give them a straight answer. He told them that he didn't want to be king, but then he left the next day and went to a festival in the village of Lucca, where he was offered a crown and refused it. But the people of Lucca insisted he accept it, and so he did. So yeah, to make a very long story short, Julius Caesar's refusal to address his critics, coupled with his strange behavior, convinced the people of Rome that he was planning to establish a monarchy, and that spelled trouble for him, because Roman society had strong democratic values and a bad track record with kings, and so it created the perfect environment for a coup. If you want to hear about how Caesar was assassinated, then go ahead and click here. But otherwise, thank you for watching.